welcome to the Old Fart Geeks podcast. This week on our third episode, we discuss Thomas Edison, Pong, Mickey Mouse, and more. I'm Jason Oakley, and this is my co-host, Will Tompkinson. Hey, Will!
Hey, mate.
How do you like that intro?
You're getting better. One day you'll
No.
nail it, I'm sure. How you doing, mate?
Not too bad. Ready for another show. A bit of techie, old tech stuff for the Old Fart Geeks.
If you can hear the rumbling in the background, don't mind me. We're just having like a major storm at the moment, so it's fine.
He hasn't had dinner, folks, so his stomach's a bit noisy.
So
Gets a bit like that.
it is.
We start off with some of our usual This Week in Tech History from Tom Merritt. In 1777, the Spanish founded California's first civilian settlement called Pueblo de San Jose de Guadalupe. It would become the future state's first capital and eventually the heart of Silicon Valley. Why don't we do one each? You do the next one and so on.
Yeah, well, I mean, we all know Thomas Edison and what he was known for. A lot of people didn't realise that he basically invented the phonograph as well. So in 1877, Thomas Edison tested out his phonograph invention. He recorded the first lines of the poem "Mary Had a Little Lamb." I think it was the first 4 lines or something fit onto the cartridge from memory. He then recreated the event in 1927. So 50 years, 50 years prior, in 1877, he actually was the first recorded words. That was pretty neat.
Yeah, pretty primitive back then, but that was a major leap forward.
A wax toilet roll, effectively.
Wax on, wax off. Wax head. In 1901, at 2156 Trip Avenue in Chicago, Elias and Flora welcomed their new baby boy into the world. They had no idea at the time that Mickey Mouse had also come into the world along with their son, Walt Disney. Hello, everybody!
Yep, and wasn't that a revolution in itself?
Yeah.
Man.
Oh, sorry.
Giving birth to a mouse. I mean, that's just...
Something wrong there.
That's it. In 1913, Henry Ford added the moving chassis assembly line to produce the Model T in Highland Park, Michigan factory. It was the crowning glory in its attempts to increase efficiency in production. So it's basically the first mainstream production line, as we know it, similar technique to as we know it today. And despite the rumours, he never actually said you can have it in any colour you want, provided it's black. It just so happens that the first run of the cars were black because it was the cheapest paint. Later on, they were available in all colours. That's one of the most famous misquotes ever, that one.
Yeah, 640k should be enough for anyone.
That's it.
In 1942, Enrico Fermi, Leo Szilard, didn't we do that guy last week, and their colleagues achieved a successful nuclear fission chain reaction in a squash court underneath the football grandstand of the University of Chicago Stagg Field. The atomic age had begun.
Now we all know in 1956, I think it was, the Russians put up the Sputnik. So in 1957, not to be left behind, America decided, hey, we can do the same thing. We're going to launch the Vanguard TV3. Okay, fine, we've designed it to only launch a meter in the air, then it's going to explode. But that's not the point. It's going to be a crowning glory.
Something happened.
Hang on a minute.
Whoops, a bit of fuel leaked out there and went kablooey.
Yeah, so, once again, America's on the ball with their space race.
They should have left them behind.
They never really kind of got in front, did they? They started off behind and never actually got a chance to catch up.
And then they filmed that thing in the Nevada desert, pretending that they went to the moon and all that.
Yeah, well, I mean, they had GoPros at the time to do that too, so that was useful.
4K, I believe they were.
That's it, exactly.
1962, Ferranti Limited switched on the Atlas, the UK's first supercomputer. It was the most powerful computer in the world at the time and doubled the UK's scientific computing capability.
And 1963 was a magnificent year
for sports.
Yeah, I mean, I'll read it out. The
People
CBS broadcasting of the college football game between Army and Navy was the first televised use of the instant replay feature, which, as we know, within a few seconds of it airing, they can go back, rewind it, play it back
That's
again.
how they can make sports games these days last twice as long. Let us replay that from about 20 angles now. This is from the ball. Bounce. Clunk.
So in 1963, when that happened, a lot of the viewers got confused because apparently, obviously, it had never been a thing before, and nobody bothered to explain it to them, and they called in to complain.
They're like, dude, that guy scored a touchdown 4 times exactly the same way. Is it like a glitch in the Matrix? Oh my God, I don't understand what's going on.
What I find interesting about this, I mean...
Excuse you. It is called Old Fart Geeks, right? Not Old Geek Farts.
What I find interesting about this is that it was in a college football game. I mean, I know that, college football's huge in the States, but something groundbreaking in terms of the technology for the era to be used in that sort of environment, I find that, that's quite fascinating for me.
It is, yeah. Very interesting. In 1972, the last Apollo moon mission, Apollo 17, was launched. The crew took the famous blue marble picture that now graces desktop backgrounds everywhere.
Yes, in 1972, Nolan Bushnell installed a coin-operated arcade game at the Andy Capp's Tavern in Sunnyvale, California. It only played Pong. That was it. Within 4 months, there were 10,000 across the country. So basically, 1972 was the introduction to the arcade machine as we know it, I guess, today, effectively. It hasn't changed a lot. But there's a lot of history in that article. Obviously, coin-op machine. Andy Capp's Tavern.
Yeah.
Which, is like still a comic strip to this day.
But that's British.
Well, yeah. The Tavern, yeah, that's right.
Okay, Andy Capp is British.
Yeah. Pong was obviously, it was the advent of the crossover between home entertainment system, or home, entertainment systems, I suppose, and arcade systems. So that's really cool.
One of my favourite cartoons of Andy Capp was he was out playing cricket one time, and he was hitting the balls going far, and one of the other guys says to him, "Hey Andy, you know what you should try? You should try playing golf. That'd be pretty cool, and you're obviously really good at hitting the ball." And then he just sort of swears and walks off, and he's like, "What's up with him?" He's like, "When Andy hits the ball, he wants somebody else to go chase after it."
That's it.
In 1985, the Cray XMP-48 began operation at the San Diego Supercomputer Center. It almost doubled the speed of other machines with a parallel processing system which ran at 420 megaflops.
That's a lot of flops.
And 420. So what are those guys on at the time?
It's apparently they could. I'm just reading an article about it. They could achieve an even faster speed if they ran 2 Crays together on different parts of the same problem. So it was an early, I guess,
network CPU kind of thing.
Networking system. Yeah, you could split. Give this machine this card, this machine this card, this machine this card, and that all tied together the output, so you could have it all working like that. So that's pretty neat.
Early Beowulf cluster.
That's it. With the decapitated head and everything. I didn't realise 1992 the first text message was sent on the Vodafone in the UK, the network, from a PC to a mobile device. It just happened to say Merry Christmas, but I'm thinking back to mobile phones. I thought it was the digital age before they sent text messages. I didn't realise it was an analog thing.
Yeah.
So, because I think like the first phone I had to do it was the Philips Savvy, which was my first digital phone. I had an old Ericsson brick phone for that, and it didn't do it. I didn't realise it was analog. So that's pretty neat. That's 10 years, 92. When did I get my first digital? Like 96 or something, 97. So it's like 5 years before I even knew it was a thing. Yeah.
My first mobile was something like Nokia, I don't know, 5410 or something like that. I can't even remember the numbers. I know I had a 3210. I thought that was the most awesomest phone. And when I traded in my previous Nokia for it, at this shop, mobile phone shop, this guy is like, he takes it out of the case, because I always had it in a case that was hooked on my belt, and he takes it out of the case and he has a look at it. He's like, holy cow, and he went around the office and he's showing everyone, look at the condition of this. It's like pristine. It's like he's never used the phone. It was always in the case on his belt. This is like brand new. I've never seen anything like this. People trade in the old crappy broken stuff. This one still works and it looks like he just got it.
It was funny when I met Son, my wife. She actually had a 5110, which was one of the most common Nokia phones ever
That might have
sold.
been at 5110.
Yeah, it was
so
the
many Nokias because that was the thing at the time.
rectangle thing. And it was, when was that? That was 2002.
Yep.
I think I met her, and she still had that, and that was released in like '96. So, but I think my first, if you can call it a phone, a mobile phone, my first mobile phone was the Motorola Bag phone.
Oh, okay. I'm just having a look.
So-
I found a website, omeo.com/phone/Nokia/old, and it's got pictures of all the old ones with the models and stuff.
I always wanted this slide phone out of Matrix, the Ericsson slide phone.
Yeah.
Always wanted that. I never actually got one, but a mate of mine got one. The first day he used it, the slide flew off the bottom.
Wow.
I'm like, oh, I don't want one of those anymore.
3220.
The 51, yeah, the
Might
32,
Thought it
3210,
was
3220s were pretty popular.
Yeah, there it is, 3210. I had that was my second one. The first one must have been a 50 something.
The 5110 was probably the phone to have at the time.
Let me just search
I
5110.
had an Ericsson
It's not there.
Shark phone, Ericsson T28 Shark phone. I had a Philips Savvy. I had a Motorola Jazz because you had to have one of those. That was like the thing.
Yeah.
And then I think that was about my last. The Ericsson T28 Shark phone was about my last standard phone. From that point on, I went to like integrated PDAs with phones and stuff like that. So I only really had like 3 standard phones.
Yeah. No, it might have been a 5110. I can't remember now.
You can actually still buy 5110 phones off eBay that have got a USB cable in them, so you can plug them into your computers for like Skype and stuff.
Oh, so it's not really a phone. It's just like a Skype
Just a
phone, but
casing,
it's got
yeah.
the casing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Or you can get them. You can get them for your other phone. You can use them like a. You can actually get. I've seen it. Somebody's made a cradle up that mostly works with the Galaxy range of phones and the Note, like the Samsung stuff. You put the phone inside it. It's one of the old. It looks like an old ceramic phone, the old black ones.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And the phone slides in underneath and clicks into the USB port. And it's actually got a proper phone, like an old rotunda dialer and everything on it. It all translates that to the USB port so that it all actually makes phone calls. And it's got the big handset and everything on it. It's awesome. It's about like $500, but I'd so love to have one of those.
That's nuts.
So
I remember when I was really young, we had these. My sister and I had these old phones, but it would just connect through a cable to another phone.
yeah,
And so she had one in her room and I had one in my room, and I could pick it up and go, "Hey sis, you awake yet?
yeah.
What are we going to do today? Mum and Dad are still asleep. This is really cool." Yeah. Hang up.
You used to be able to do that. You had to wait like 20 seconds for the ringtone to die off so that you didn't get it.
Yeah.
I remember in the old days you could figure out like my nephew and I used to ring, but whoever rung, if I rung you,
Yep.
then you could hang up, and 5 minutes later you could pick the phone back up again and continue the conversation.
Yeah, because it never hung up the call.
Yeah, so we used to do that. Like he'd ring me, then he'd have to go to bed, so he'd hang the phone up, go to his room, pretend to go to sleep for 5 minutes, and go and pick the phone up in his room and to continue the conversation. It was really cool.
Oh, Mama really went to sleep.
Back in the old days, where the only way I could watch MacGyver on TV, but he couldn't get it where he was. So
Yeah.
I used to hold the phone up to the TV for the entire episode.
And now you could stream it to him.
So
I did have, at one stage, there was a little room in the downstairs part of the house, which was a garage, but the people who owned the house before Mum and Dad got it had a wine cellar put there. And so I said to Dad, I want to move out of the upstairs of the house. Can I move downstairs in this little one? I've got my own stuff. I can do whatever I want, get up, go to bed when I want and stuff like that. They're like, oh yeah. So Dad put in a false ceiling in there, a bit of carpeting and a double bunk bed. And I had my Commodore 64 down there. And I had a little intercom that I installed with a wire going out the window and upstairs, so that when it was dinner time, instead of Mum and Dad kicking on the floor and stomping and going, "Oi, dinner's ready," I said, "You can just press this button, it'll buzz, then I can answer and say, 'Hey, what's up?' And they're like, 'Yeah, dinner's ready.'" Okay, cool. And then I go up. And then one day we had a power outage, and the power went out, and I realised that the intercom has got capacitors in it, so it's still got power for a couple of seconds. So I waited till Mum was in the lounge room. I quickly pressed the button and went, "Hi Mum, how's it going?" And it cut out. She's like, "How did you do that? Our power has gone out. You shouldn't be able to talk to us through there." You could hear it just go, "Hi Mum, it's you." As the power died. Tricked them. In 1993, the US Secretary of Defense declared that the GPS system, Tom Merritt GPS system, they call that tautology or something, used a dual-use system that had an initial operation capability and opened the standard positioning system to civilians, which gave accuracies of 9 meters horizontally. And not long after, gave birth to geocaching. Yeah! Which is the most important use of GPS systems there is.
I love geocaching. I just suck at it immensely. But it's great fun.
I think we've done nearly 190 geocaches now. My daughter loves it. She just absolutely... I used to take her when she was like 3 and be like, "Let's go treasure hunting." She's like, "Yeah, treasure hunting." So we go there because you always take something that you can drop off, because the whole point of it is to drop off something and take something. So we'd take something and drop off, but she'd find a toy in there or balloon or some kind of things that kid would like. There we go, 173 caches found so far. So I'm getting there.
I think I've done 3. I think I've tried about 40.
You think that's... I had a friend of mine I'd met, I can't remember if I was doing a electronics course or met him on the internet or something, and he's like, "I want to find out about this geocaching. I've never done it before." And I said, "Oh, okay, well, why don't you come over, meet at my place, and I'll take you out and I can show you what it's all about." He's like, "Okay." I said, "Bring a GPS." I got one that was eTrex Basic, which is a black and white one, and it was about $350 at that stage. And so I took them out. He brought his wife along, and so we went out geocaching. We had a look at some of the stuff, and we got to this one, and I was like, "Okay, it says it should be around here somewhere." We looked for like half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, and like, "I don't know, I can't find it." And his wife goes, "Is this it?" I was like, "How the hell did you find that?" And it had, where we were, there was a cycleway, and there was a metal bar that went up across like this, and then there was another one across here to block people from driving through, so you could just walk or ride. And the metal cap that's on the end of the pole, somebody had pulled that off and then glued inside this metal tube, and then put the cache inside that, and then when you pop it back on the end, it just looks like it's part of the structure there, because that's where it came from originally. And so I'm looking, can't find it, and she's like, "Is this it? What?" And so we got a photo of her holding onto it, which we didn't put on the site because it'd give away the clue. It was like, "Oh, I never would have found that." Anyway, I think they've found about 4,000 caches now. They really got into it. Every weekend they'd find like 30, 40, maybe 50 caches, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'll do it once in a while or something." So I've done 173, which sounds like a lot, except for when you talk to these guys. And they've done so many. Have you done it just around your area?
Yeah, there was actually a period there, especially when I got my first Android phone.
Yep.
Back when the first I don't think what it was now, PCC or whatever it was, and I thought I'll get into this, and I went and did it, and I spent, where I was at the time at Chimera, there was a dozen within, I don't know, a K or two of where I was. Thought, cool, I'll spend a heap of time. And I went to the first one, there was a note saying, "So this one's been disabled due to vandalism," and another one had been removed due to like the fire trail being cleared, and another one had been taken out for roadworks, and I'm like, I got up to like the 10th one, and I'm like, and I spent like an hour looking for that one. I'm like, screw
it's
this.
Not there either. I was a little bit overestimating. They've done 981, so it's still like 8 times as many as I've done. And that's like began caching in Sydney, Australia in December 2002, then moved to Christchurch, New Zealand in August 2003, and then to Perth in February 2004, and they've been doing it ever since. And so now they've done 981 caches, and I'm like, I've done 173, and I thought that was good. But it's good now because you can get apps for your iPhone and your Android phone, and you can just do all of it on there, which means you can connect to the site, click on do a search of all caches in this area, get a list of them, and then you just click on go to this one, and it shows you a little Google map of the relative area where it is, so you can drive to the street, then you hop out, switch it over to compass mode, and you can follow your phone along until you get to it, and then you've found where you're going, and then just do your searching from there. But lots of fun. I gave my daughter my old GPS so she can walk along with it and try and help find as well. She can do her own bits and pieces.
That's it.
And one more for you.
Sorry, I was just reading about the old, I was stuck on the old Nokia webpage.
You'll be stuck in that rabbit hole for a long time, my friend.
I know.
The memories!
In 1996, General Motors began delivery of the EV1, which was a revolutionary electric vehicle at the time, and due to the fact that it had lead-acid batteries, they had about an equivalent of 2 litres of fuel was its storage capacity in the battery bank. So they did everything they could. They ran magnesium in the seat frames, they ran aluminium chassis, they had plastic bodies, they had Perspex windows, they made it a 2-seater, which went against the market trend at the time, but it was, they had low friction tyres, they had all this, they even had specially designed wiper blades so they didn't make, interfere with the airflow. And they got down to a coefficient of 0.19, which is about half of what most cars are at the time. Most cars were about 0.4 in terms of, that's the way the drag coefficient on the vehicle terms the use of the power. So you could effectively travel, on this what is in a sense 2 litres of petrol, even though it was batteries. You could effectively travel the best part of 100 k's on that, and this thing was hugely revolutionary. All the steps they went to do it. They also had another one. They had another EV vehicle as well at the same time. Now, what was weird was at the same time they're putting this huge amount of resources into this EV1. It was part of the California at the time was going to introduce a zero emissions law. X amount of vehicles produced had to be zero emissions, but so they're spending heaps of money on this electric vehicle, and at the same time they're spending multi-millions of dollars in the courts trying to get this law overturned. So, and then they rolled these vehicles out. They never actually sold any of them. They leased every single one of them, and they refused to sell them to anybody. And then in 2002, actually the take back started in 2000. They basically said, no, we're not going to renew your lease, give us the car back. And as all the releases expired, they were forced to return all the vehicles. Their excuse was that they couldn't provide maintenance and service components. They couldn't promise availability of components for the next 15 years, which is part of the American mandate. So they said, well, because we can't do that, we need to take them off the road, even though there were no failures of any of the components at that point. And then there's actually a really good video called Death of the Electric Car. It's really worth a watch. It's on YouTube. You can torrent it, things like that. Basically, a group of people followed these trucks that were collecting these and taking them out to an abandoned airfield, and they sat there for years. And I think it was only in 2006 or 2008, something like that, they actually crushed all these cars. So, and there's only one surviving car that basically a rich guy said, no, you're not getting it back. That's all there is to it.
I'm a collector.
Pretty much. They made him disable it. They pulled out the control board and stuff out of it. But effectively, he's got the only surviving example of that car.
Now everybody's trying to make them.
Well, there was another story as well. There was I can't think what it was called. I'm trying to Google it, but
who killed the electric car?
I think it was called the EV. I don't think it was EV1. I think it was just called the EV. But it was basically, it kind of looked like a little RAV4 4Runner sort of shape, 4-wheel drive, and it was electric, and it had what they call big cell batteries, was what these things ran on, which are a very, very high density power output battery.
Yep.
And they basically couldn't sell enough of these cars, so they wanted to make money. So they sold the patents to these batteries. Now they sold them to, I believe it was BP. I'm doing this off the top of my head. I can't remember the story exactly, but and that was nearly 20 years ago. And the patent law states that if you don't produce a product within an X amount of time, I believe it's 20 years, then you have to hand over the patent. The patent becomes basically free reign. It becomes public domain effectively. And I remember reading an article earlier this year stating that BP is about to release a new style of battery. So everybody's been hanging out to get these big cell batteries because they are an amazing development.
Yep.
So whether or not BP bring them out, or whether their patent expires and someone else brings them out, but they're a really good thing. But it's strange. Like the original, you go back to the early 1900s, 1910s, 1920s. There was a lot of electric vehicles on the road, especially in places like London, where there was already a huge pollution problem and fuel was quite scarce. A lot of the major car manufacturers actually had electric vehicles.
Yep.
They had the old glass and rubberized case batteries, lead acid batteries under the floor. You'd charge them up at home, or when you got to work, you'd just use the power that was available, and you would just drive them like a normal car. And it's nothing new. It's just something we'd sort of forgotten about for the last 80 years, and they went, "Oh, hang on,
we got enough fuel. We don't need those."
Well, that's pretty much what it comes down to.
Buy fuel. Make us richer. We only got $1 kajillion. We need 20 kajillion.
Well, yeah, I mean, pretty much that's what it comes down to. And I mean, if you go back and you have a look, basically you just Google electric car, you'll see these vehicles that are effectively are nothing more than a horse-drawn buggy with the horse removed and a bank of batteries put in. That's literally what they are. There's nothing special about them. Like, you used to look at them and you go, how does that thing even like stay together?
Yep.
But it's, yeah, I mean, even for people like a lot of people know Tesla.
Yep.
For various reasons, the Tesla coil and the Tesla turbine and things like that. But he even had a vehicle. He did a demonstration of a vehicle that ran purely on, I guess, magnetic principles. It was basically had these big steel rods positioned around the vehicle, and with no other powered source other than the magnetism these were generating, he was able to, have propulsion in a vehicle. But the electric vehicle goes, as I was saying, goes right back to 1828. Put into some Hungarian designed cars, and then it sort of got. I think it was no, and even in 1837, they were the first. They were known as electric locomotives back then, and they were run off galvanic cells, which were a very, very early form of a battery. They weren't really even a battery. They were more like a liquid capacitor at that point.
Yep.
So it's certainly nothing new. But this annoying part about this whole thing is the last 100+ years that these things have been around, batteries, either by design or by just lack of innovation, haven't really improved.
If anyone knows about batteries, Mr. Big Boom, Big Bada Boom over here.
That was well timed.
I was going, it's God. Anyone knows about batteries, it's God. I was saying, you were talking about Tesla and batteries, and I was just going to mention that news article recently. Nevada hit the jackpot in a 5-state bid to host Tesla Motor Incorporated's $5 billion battery factory, which could help achieve mass market for low-emission electric vehicles by the end of the decade. Governor Brian Sandoval offered the automaker $1.25 billion in tax breaks over the next 20 years, more than double Tesla's requested $500 million incentive package to build what will become the world's largest lithium-ion battery plant at a location outside of Reno. In return, the so-called Gigafactory is expected to generate $100 billion for Nevada's economy over the next 2 decades, says Sandoval. It'll create 6,500 jobs, add 4% to the state's gross domestic product, and the government will seek approval of the deal in a special legislative session. And they're going to use that to improve the technology in batteries, which, as you said, has been stagnant for quite a while.
Yep. Now, don't forget, Tesla, the motor company Tesla, is in no way related to Tesla I was speaking about earlier.
No,
but
I was just using it as a convenient segue.
No, but the reason they chose his name is because of that reason. He was an innovator, he was the designer, he created and modified things around him.
Especially with electricity.
with electricity and with locomotion to some degree, and that's why they actually named the company after him, because their vision was the way they wanted to go about things and the way they wanted to design and develop things were very similar to the way Tesla went about things.
Same sort of held the same sort of principles.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, if Tesla was around today, this is sort of what they envision he would be doing.
Yep.
You know, so it's I was just looking here quickly at the chart. The Baker Electric, which was in 1899 to 1915, cost at the time US $2,300, which in 1900 that's probably like I don't know 20 or 30 grand today. It had a top speed of 23 kilometers an hour and it had an 80 kilometer range, and that's 100 years ago. It had an 80 kilometer range. Some of the cars I've got now don't have that. there was one here, the Chevrolet S10, I think, was the one I was thinking about before. It had the you know, a big range. But the EV1, which is the vehicle that started this whole thing, had a top speed of 130 kilometers an hour and had a 250 kilometer range.
Yeah.
You know, which is insane. The Tesla Roadster, which is the current one they're building before they bring the new one out, costs about 110 US, 180 or so Australian dollars. Top speed of 210 kilometers an hour and has a 350 kilometer range. So you can't tell me that the excuse of I don't think I can get to work and back is no longer a valid excuse. I don't think.
No, my ex has got a hybrid and mostly travels on electricity, and it's great for in Melbourne because you get it in traffic a lot, and you're just sitting there and you don't want to be just burning fuel, so you might as well be burning electricity at the batteries, and then every time you put the brakes on, which happens a lot in traffic anyway, you make the electricity back again.
Yeah, you regen. Yeah, a mate of mine's got the Prius, and they average. I mean, it's only I think it's a 40 litre fuel tank or 35 litre fuel tank.
Fuel, yeah.
And they average between 1,100 and 1,500 k's on a tank of fuel. You know, and some of them are even more economical like that. Like the I think it's the IMEV, the Mitsubishi MyEV or something like that it was called, or was it a Nissan Leaf? I can't remember, but one of them actually has a solar panel, a flexible solar panel on the roof.
Yeah.
And so when you're sitting in traffic, as you're saying, the downside of the Prius is after you're sitting there for 10 minutes and you got the aircon on, the radio on, you got the wipers happening, the headlights on, the motor starts to run the generator to charge your battery bank back up again. But when they've got the solar panel on the roof, you can sit in traffic on a nice sunny day with the aircon on and your radio going, and it produces enough power to do that. So you can literally sit in traffic and not have any engine running at all. So yeah, it's pretty neat. I mean, it's definitely the way it's going to go. I'd love to have an electric vehicle. I think, given that you know I spend upwards of $150 a week just to get to work and back.
Then you go on long trips down to Melbourne and Geelong and stuff.
Well, yeah, that's it. I mean, that was, to go down to Victoria and back to Brisbane again was a $3,000 fuel bill, not including everything else that went along with that.
Yeah, accommodation, food.
Yeah, exactly. So if you could take your fuel bill out of the equation, you've only got to worry about, accommodation and food. So suddenly $3,000 plus expenses becomes $3,000 including expenses.
You could buy a new computer instead of having one that got fried.
Yeah, well, there's that.
And something else we should mention, inventor Ralph Baer, the father of video games, died last weekend at the age of 92. Ralph H. Baer, the man widely acknowledged as the father of home video games for his pioneering work in electronics and television engineering, died on Saturday in his home in Manchester. He was 92 years old. Video games have become a ubiquitous billion-dollar industry that has in recent years surpassed the movie business. And as well as the PlayStations, the Xboxes and Wiis can all be traced back to Baer's work in his brown box. As New York Times describes it, it was a sultry summer day in 1966 when Baer, who was working as an engineer for a defence contractor Sanders Associates, now part of the BAE system, scribbled out a 4-page description for a game box that would allow people to play action, sports and other games on a television set. One Sanders executive saw potential in Baer's idea and gave him $2,500 and 2 engineers to work on the project. Over the years, they churned out 7 prototypes in a secret workshop before leaning on a version that Baer and Sanders would use to file the first video game patent in 1971. The brown box was licensed to Magnavox and went on sale as the Odyssey in 1972, the world's first video game system. The primitive system was all hardware and used program cards for games. Plastic overlays for the television screen provided colour, and it was priced at $100, although Bayer had recommended $19.95. The Odyssey sold more than 100,000 units in its first year and 300,000 by 1975. When Atari's Pong debuted just months after the Odyssey went to market, Sanders and Magnavox sued them for copyright infringement. The case was settled for $700,000 and Atari became an Odyssey licensee. Over 20 years, Magnavox won more than $100 million in patent lawsuits involving the Odyssey, according to the New York Times. Bayer went on to hold more than 150 US and foreign patents for his inventions, including everything from talking doormats and an automatic tone arm for programmable record players. Among his other famous inventions was the electronic memory game Simon. Who didn't have one? I had one of those when I was a kid. Yeah. I loved my little Simon game. I used to sit there for hours. Beep, beep, beep. Beep, 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 beep,
stupid.
Beep, 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 beep. You spent hours playing that thing. I didn't know that he invented that, which he created with Harold Morrison, and that went on to be a pop sensation and still sold today. Inventing things was simply a part of who Bayer was, as he wrote in his 2005 autobiography, Video Games: The Beginning. Okay, there's another book I'm going to have to buy. Coming up with novel ideas and converting them into real products has always been as natural as breathing for me, Bayer wrote. Ralph Henry Bayer's story and life of invention began in the town of Pirmasens, Germany on March 8, 1922. The son of a Jewish shoe factory worker, the family fled from Hitler and his Nazis and emigrated to the Bronx in New York in 1938. When he was 16, he saw an ad for a correspondence course for learning how to service radios and televisions. Using a large chunk of the wages he earned working in a factory, Bayer took the course and finished in a few months, eventually quitting the factory to fix radios. He was drafted into the US Army in 1943. In his spare time, he studied algebra and fixed radios, but was also trained as an expert in small arms. After his military service, Bayer used the GI Bill to attend American Television Institute of Technology and earn one of the first bachelor degrees in television engineering. He joined Sanders Associates in 1956 and stayed there until 1987, when he retired to start his own consulting business. Bayer's work was recognised by President George W. Bush in 2006 when he awarded him with the National Medal of Technology. He was also admitted to the National Inventors Hall of Fame in 2010. He donated much of his collection of early video game prototypes to museums, including the Smithsonian Institution. So, father of video games all the way back then in the 1971 era.
It was perfect timing for it, wasn't it? It's just at that point where technology was able to somewhat deliver on what people could create.
Yeah.
So
some of those people were real visionaries for the simplistic stuff that they came up with, but the fun that the games were at the time still.
That's right. Oh, I guess, absolutely. I mean, as we mentioned before, Pong, was such a simple. It's a couple of sticks and a couple of lines, or a couple of balls and a couple of lines that move up and down. Yep. There's nothing special about it.
I had something like that. I can't remember what it was called, but it had a little box. I found a picture of something that looked like it on the internet that I posted on my Facebook not long ago. You probably saw it, and it had a version of Pong where it had 2 bats and then it had 4 bats, so you controlled 2 that crossed over each other.
Yeah, I think that was called soccer or something, and then you had hockey,
had handball, tennis. And then it had a light gun, which was quite cool, and it had a square that went across the screen. You had to try and shoot it, and then it had fast and slow modes, and it get faster.
That would have been highly accurate, I'd imagine.
Yeah, but it's so much fun having your own gun.
Let me just point at the light bulb. I wonder if it'll do the same thing.
Yeah. And then car racing and motorbike racing and stuff. So
yeah, but I mean that's something to say. Like Pong gave birth to all these other, hockey and tennis and football and whatever else they had. And as we found out before, it made it into the arcade.
Yep.
And it was just such a simple concept. I mean, Pacman was probably the biggest arcade game at the time, but it wasn't much different. It was just a little 8-bit character moving around, nibbling on,
the same maze.
So yeah. Just the ghost got quicker and quicker, it was, it's just one of those things.
But have you ever read one of those websites where they go into intricacies of analysing how it works and how each of the personalities of the ghosts and There was one ghost that would just look to follow you. There was another ghost that would look for 2 tiles ahead of where you were going, and he'd aim for that so that he'd try and get in front of you by going through the maze a different way. There was another one who would just try and get way to the end in front of you and this sort of thing, and they all had their own sort of mini AI patterns built into them of what they would do.
I'd just sit there and bounce backwards and forwards near the cherry till they got close and I'd eat cherry and eat them.
Yeah. Power pills.
That's as analysed as I ever got it. But, yeah, that's it. No, I mean, you know, where would we be with that video games? Or video games even?
Yeah. My VZ was awesome when I found out that I was getting that for Christmas by looking for something in Dad's wardrobe while he was out. And I was like, oh, I wonder if this thing is under here. I can't remember what I was looking for. I wasn't even looking for that. And I lifted up some towels that were in there. I was like, I'm getting a VZ200 computer for Christmas. Quick, hide it. Don't tell anyone.
That's me go.
Look what I got. I had this is amazing. What a wonderful present. Who knew? Me, like 2 weeks ago.
Hilarious if it was like your mother bought it for your father or something.
Yeah.
You'd have been so disappointed.
No.
So, but talking about older technology, I was looking through 8-tracks before, because I used to have an old 8-track player, but then I remembered SYN cassettes.
Yep.
Which were, Tascam was one of the biggest, Tascam and Fostex were one of the bigger manufacturers of them, and what they were basically a multi-track cassette recorder. They were a standard, used as standard cassettes that you could buy anywhere, and depending on the model you had, I actually had the 238, which was 8-track. They also come out in things like the Yamaha did like an MT400, which was a 4-track version of the same thing. 8-tracks I think was the maximum, because traditionally on a tape, just the width of the actual tape, you could actually record 8 bands across there. On a normal tape, it would record usually your 2 channels, your left and your right channel, would be recorded on half of the tape, and then you flip the tape over and it would be recorded on the other half of the tape. But what the multi-track did was it took that, split that up into sections, and you could only record off one side of the tape. You had to make sure that you marked what side of the tape you recorded on, because if you wanted to edit it or whatever later on, you put the tape in the wrong way, everything would play backwards. Which I found out the hard way.
Freddy is a devil.
But what I actually wanted to talk to Liz about was one thing I hadn't realised until years later, after I didn't even know they were a thing anymore. I started doing volunteer work at the Pioneer Settlement, and they had a sound and light show, which was basically it had a buggy that you'd get driven around in. It'd take you to various locations, and obviously there'd be audio coming through the speakers about what it was about, and different lights that get triggered and different things that happen. Now the audio could be in 3 places. It could have been from the cart itself, from the buggy itself. It could have been from directly in front of wherever you're stopped, or it could be from a speaker that you can't see that's hidden not near where you are. And it wasn't until I was actually volunteering there for a couple of years that it finally got the best of me, and I tracked down the guy who actually developed this sound light show. He actually designed it, and he was actually using an 8-track multi-track for it.
Oh, okay.
And what was actually happening was track 1 through 4 was the audio tracks. So track you could have track 1 and 2 were the audio tracks. So you could have it was track 1 through 4. So track 1 was everything that came through the buggy. Track 2 was the things that came through the position speakers. And track 3 was the ones that came through like PA style speakers, and then track 4 it came through all of them. And then track 5 through 8 were actually audio cue. They had audio cues in it that, when it was run through an analyzer, would actually physically switch, a mechanical switch, every time it heard the tone. And it would switch the lightings from different places, and it would switch around what speakers were being heard in different places. So this technology, that even by then, I mean, this was in late 90s, early 2000s. So, this is something going back to, what, multi-tracks must have been 70s?
Yep.
So this is at least 30 years past, the prime of this technology. And it was being used for this amazing sound and light display that was absolutely fascinating,
Cool.
And once you got into it and you looked at it, like obviously there was multiple copies of this tape. And like the wiring was so complex. Like there was the 8 multi-track machine, there was 2 of those in case one failed. There was 2 sound switches. There was big mechanical boards. There was all this stuff in this cabinet. That it was just so fascinating to see all this stuff that one guy had designed and created to do this entire thing, and that had been doing it every day for the last 20 years. That had just done the same thing.
Nice.
You know, twice a night that'd play it, and you'd start it the same way. You'd walk up when they were ready to start the tour. The guy would press a button on the pole, it'd start the machine rolling, and it'd start from there. And it did this twice a night, every night for 30 years, and probably still going the same. And it was just flawless. It worked. You know, they looked at replacing it with a computerized system, but it was going to cost thousands and thousands of dollars to do what this 30-year-old technology was doing every night. And it was just fascinating.
More reliable too.
Yeah, and that was it. I mean, they had multiple copies of the tape, but I remember him saying that they used to get 5 or 6 years out of one of the tapes.
You don't get that out of a computer these days, kids.
No, that's it. Well, they use the good quality tapes, you know. Every when they closed down like 2 weeks a year for doing other things, they'd always get the machine serviced, they'd get the belts changed, get the heads cleaned, you know, all that sort of stuff. And they're the same. I'm pretty sure it was actually the main machine that did it was actually the Tascam 202, which was basically, it was just a multi-track player. It was a recorder, like a dual tape deck player.
Yep.
That's pretty much all it was. Although it did use, as I said, it did use a lot of other syncing software and hardware. But
cool.
Yeah, it was, looking back on it, I was just sort of looking back on it when I was looking up eTrex stuff, and I'm like, wow, I'd love to actually, next time I go down there, I really want to know if that's still running, because when I went down there in 2000 and when I go back down there, like 2009, 2010, it was still being used then.
Yep.
So
crazy.
Yeah.
And thanks for listening and watching another episode of the Old Fart Geeks podcast. Make sure you subscribe in iTunes or your other favourite podcast application. You can also watch our show on YouTube at youtube.com/oldfartgeeks. Don't forget to subscribe so you'll keep up to date with our shows.
That's correct, and you can follow us on Twitter. Our accounts are at Warlock and at Mr. Tompkinson. That's WAULOK and MRTOMKINSON. And our show's main account is, of course, at Old Fart Geeks. Music for our show is provided by the fee. No, there's no fees because it's free. The Free Music Archive. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next time.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.